So, hi, my name is Rebecca Murillo, and this is my storytelling project. I really wanted to emphasize my title. My title is A Real Outlook on the Border, My Home. I decided to go with this title simply because I think when, I thought about what project I wanted to do, I really, wanted to emphasize life out the border, specifically mentioning, life growing up. I always say my home. And I wanted to really challenge the way we, talk about our lived experiences and talk about the real outlook on the border, the real situations, the real life stories, real lived experiences at the border, the real work that's happening at the border. And I really want to emphasize my work, my lived experiences, and the work of others. And I hope this project really does do a well job at storytelling the lived experiences because that's what I want to capture, storytelling of my stories and experiences and the stories and experiences of others and what we can learn from each other and the real outlook on things, the real lived experiences and how having conversations really does make a difference. So, to start off, um I want to give you a little bit of backstory on specifically my story, my home. Kind of meshes it into the title of my home and the outlook on the border. So I was born and raised in Nogales, Arizona. So I grew up at the border. I think when I say that, it's always been a bit of a challenge and a bit of an identity struggle, I'd say. It's definitely hard when you mention that because being Chicana, being Mexican American, it's very hard to identify yourself as just one thing. You're not too Mexican to be Mexican. You're not American enough to be American. So, kind of challenging that. And I think a lot of people who are born and raised at the border or have, the similar situations to mine have these experiences and these feelings. And I kind of liked to identify myself as both, again, Chicana, Mexican American, but it doesn't stop there. When people ask me where I'm from, where I'm born, you know, I say I was born and raised in Mexico and Arizona. I was born and raised in Nogales. And I don't define or constrain myself to one. I always say, it's a two in one. I was born and raised in Nogales, Arizona, Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. I really love saying that because it really does define who I am and what my lived experiences have shaped me into. Growing up at the border, I loved the sense of community. I loved the culture I was surrounded by. I loved getting, you know, my my ancestors. Like I felt so close to my community and you know, being a part of that is just wonderful. Being able to experiencing, living at the border. I got to have a US education, but at the same time, I was able to still live and breathe my Mexican culture. And that's why I say it's also a two in one. I got the kind of the best of both worlds. I have this lived experience and of the border and it's such a positive thing. And, a lot of people question or ask me, hey, is it safe at the border? And, I don't blame people for asking that. Sometimes it's out of curiosity or sometimes it's out of not really knowing. But to those people, I say it's completely safe. It's, you know, I think the stigma in itself is what I also want to address in this presentation. I think by having these conversations, we can do that because, the news really goes out of its way to show the ugliest of the ugliest. And I always say, when I get asked those types of questions, is it safe? There's violence everywhere. There's bad things happening all over the world, whether we acknowledge it or not. Um, but I always say, I have the best experience living at the border. I have nothing but positive things because I'm constantly reminded and humbled by where I came from. It's a beautiful place to grow up in. Never felt unsafe, I always felt secure and welcomed. There's been times even where I felt more safe in my little border towns than I do in other places in the United States or outside. And it's crazy. So I always try to answer with, I love growing up in a place where I felt so connected, and I love that I still get to go and live at the border. And my whole family still lives over there, and Tucson's not far from here, from Nogales. So I go so much because I feel so safe and so, you know, inspired to want to create something and create conversations and talk about these lived experiences, because that's, how we get change. And, it kind of shaped my whole career that I want to, go into. I want to do bilingual curriculum designs. I want to work for nonprofits and do all this because, and I've done that already in some shape or form, but I'm proud and I'm blessed to be able to put myself out there and in supports and in hopes to inspire my Latinx community here in Tucson. And I'm just very, very, very proud that through sharing my lived experiences and making that change, we can actually see a difference happen. And that's kind of the whole point of calling this the real outlook at the border, the real stories behind the individuals creating the change. It's my home, the border. And I love hearing lived experiences different to mine, similar to mine, because it's how we have these conversations. We keep the pláticas going and ensure that they're not lost. And I'll touch more on that in a bit. But this is my Instagram, Youth for Immigration Reform. This is an Instagram that I started, and I'll show you a little, but this is resources for immigrants and refugees. That's available on the Instagram. We have different activism posts, like United We Dream post. We have different quotes like Justicia para los Inmigrantes, social movements. I have pictures that I took of myself of the border. I took these myself. I really wanted to emphasize how I see the border through my eyes, and the captions are really based off of what I felt at those times. Like, where is the humanity? ¿Dónde está la humanidad? How do we change the opinion of others? Build bridges, not walls. I really wanted to emphasize on, border reform and how it starts with creating unity. Art all over the border. I took these myself as well. And, all the border art, all these artivists are out here making art to create unity between the US and Mexico. And all these are great activists who are on social media using their platform to share their lived experiences, but also to educate others. And that's kind of, what I inspire to be, and why I decided to focus my project on talking about these experiences, talking about how to be the activists so we can see change happen. Youth for Immigration Reform came from that. And, I really wanted to have a space where I could give back and highlight those people who share these lived experiences. And I'll touch more on some of my favorite activists, but I get to share my form of photography and my feelings at those times when I share images at the border, because sometimes it's full of frustration because, I have family members who don't have the same access that I do. And I think it stems from a little bit of guilt that I have from, having a bit more privilege and being born in the US. And I think it's the frustration, the stigma that, society carries. And I wanted to really put it all out there. And, this was only some of what I have on the Instagram. So I'm very proud and I'm very passionate about, really putting yourself out there and explaining how you feel to others and sharing your stories and your artwork. So these are some of the activists that I love. So I have Border Artists. This is their Instagram page, but so beautiful. The work that they do. They focus on photography through the US and Mexico borders. They really emphasize on the feeling of the individual when they're either at the US side of the border or the Mexico side of the border, or right at the border wall. Their artwork through photography is beautiful. They really capture what border life is all about through photography, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful to see such creativity and such passion through pictures of our border. And I encourage you to look through their Instagram. It's very, very, very wonderful and very beautiful that this person can, really show so much through an image. Again, my next favorite activist is my undocumented ass. I followed them on TikTok, but despite his comedy tactic to things, he showcased strength, and he shares his experience of being undocumented and things we can do to change things. He shares the reality of what's going on at the border and what's going on with immigration. Sometimes we see the ugly of the ugliest on the news, and he kind of put some truth on some of the things. So he fact checks a lot of things. He, debunks a lot of things. He has solutions for a lot of these ugly things that the news is, kind of broadcasting on the border. He emphasizes on, border and immigration reform. For example, he started writing a letter with a bunch of other undocumented people, and they're sending them out to different important people like our government, city councils, and people like us to start talking about it and start reaching for the change we want to see happen. He talks about how, there hasn't been immigration reform in over 37 years, and how insane that is, because we've changed so much as a society. We've evolved so much. We've grown with technology. We've evolved in, stigmatizing each other and really hearing others out. I think we've become better at it. Still not 100%, but better at it. And he emphasizes how we've changed so much in 37 years and there hasn't been any type of reform. There's currently more than about 11 million people undocumented, and that's simply because there hasn't been an immigration reform in over 37 years. The route to getting your US citizenship or even a visa is practically getting harder and harder, even more so impossible now, which is insane to think how we've kind of worked backwards. He kind of pours out frustrations with that. So I encourage you to watch his videos as well. It's inspiring, but it gets you thinking and it gets you upset because you reflect on, people people you may not know, who currently struggle, all because there hasn't been an immigration reform, and there's people out there who don't see the need for it, and it's extremely frustrating. Next, I want to talk about United We Dream. They're in super active on Twitter and Instagram, and they post the most powerful videos and pictures on how we can be united, how unity kind of shapes us all into one, and how we can learn from one another through storytelling. They're a nonprofit organization. They're the largest immigrant youth network. So it's so many individuals start telling their lived experiences, storytelling, and it's so amazing and so inspiring to see so many individuals sharing their truth. So I hope you all go out there and really look at these activisms, because it's what kind of brings me to my whole idea for this project. If we can start by being activists and by sharing our stories and by talking and having these pláticas, these conversations with others, then we're really putting our work, and it's kind of like keeping our stories alive in a way. I also want to talk about the different barrio stories that I watched. So if you guys want to watch them, you can go to barriostories.org. But I watched a couple that I really want to highlight on. I watched one on celebrations and community making. The celebration one was so amazing to watch, because they go into what celebration means to us in our barrios, in our community, and it's all about having each other's backs and hearing one another and celebrating our lives, because so many of our ancestors really didn't have a celebration of life because, of all that's happened, but how celebration in our community is basically always there. There's always a celebration to celebrate all of our wins and celebrate our milestones and our community, and it's just a beautiful storytelling moment that I saw. And celebration between our barrios is exactly what this culture is. It's about celebrating everyone as an individual, as a family member, as a friend, as a neighbor. I love that they use celebration not just as celebrating a birthday, or they used it as more of a celebration of life, which I loved, because I agree. I think through celebration, especially within our barrios, we're able to really connect with one another and really enhance, um, our lived experiences. And it's honestly amazing. And I encourage you all to watch it. I also watched one talk about community, and it was honestly very sad to see because, a lot of these are really real stuff that happens, but also these tough conversations that you don't really want to have. So they talk about how communities in our barrio are feeling less and less united. Um, and how, as a young child myself and during my adolescence, it was very much united. And my dad grew up in a barrio, like a pueblo, and I went there all the time and sometimes even for an entire summer. So I know what it's like to be a part of the barrio and really understand the community and really be friends with everyone, know everyone, and have this community feel. And so in this video, they talk about how really our barrios are not as community feel like anymore. They were saying how they used to know all their neighbors, and now they hardly know any. They probably know like up to 5 people. Um, and so when they're asked, why do you think that is? Um, you know, there's many things, but they're kind of saying how it's because society kind of has this expectation of everyone, and when that expectation is not met, then you're not fit to what society defines as great or successful. Um, our barrios used to be very united, but I think through the societal pressures, how they're mentioning, it's become less because afraid of judgment. I think they're afraid of judgment. I think people are afraid to show realities of hardships, and that's because of societal pressures. I remember growing up and not having that societal pressure, not needing anyone's approval, playing outside. And they also touch on, technology side of things. Technology, really enhanced the way the whole world views each other. You know, our barrios were really united through engaging in social parties and in saying hi and being outside, being in the present moment. And I think nowadays that's very rare to live in the present moment with so much technology and so much expectations and societal pressure that everyone keeps to themselves. And it's affecting even our barrios because, in a way, they're saying it kind of feels lost. Our stories, our experiences feel lost because we're not able to speak with one another and really focus on the storytelling. Because when we talk about our lived experiences, no matter how big or small they seem, it matters because these stories and these conversations are past and past and past, and not connecting with each other because of pressures, and technology is kind of dimming the light for our chance of storytelling and our chance of really talking about our lived experiences. And that's something that they focus on in this video of community, how there's lots of that, and how they're really focused on just themselves because of all this pressure. And it's really upsetting because it's honestly true, and it's things that all of us don't really admit, but it's become more dense, the world in itself. But to happen in barrios where this is something that's really crucial to you know, be a part of storytelling, it's it's worrisome because no one wants to ever be forgotten, specifically if we don't ever, share our stories and our lived experiences. We're never gonna have change, which is insane to think about and scary. But I encourage you all to go out there and see these different stories because they left me completely speechless. Relevance and why it's important. I basically kind of covered that, but quickly I want to mention that I did take this picture myself, and it's on our Border for Youth Reform Instagram. It's something I wanted to share because it's the border through my eyes, and you know, it's what we've talked about and all this presentation and you know importance of all this is storytelling, talking about our experiences is what keeps us relevant in a way. It keeps the dream alive for so many people. It keeps hope around by sharing stories. It keeps our names through generations and generations, and it's what I've mentioned before. It's why it's important to not get lost and to not be forgotten of who we are. We're this amazing community, and it's important to share how we feel, what we can do, what we want to see happen, because if we don't, we're gonna be completely forgotten and we're gonna assimilate to, it's already existing. That's why it's important to keep those conversations going. And again, I took this picture of the border. It's about, keeping these conversations going, keeping these uncomfortable conversations going. And it's important that we keep focused on sharing these experiences and storytelling through having a plática conversation like I am right now, or talking to anyone about your lived experiences, being an activist through social media, through art, through photography. It's so important to keep our barrio stories, our lived experiences, our wants, our needs, our cultura, our culture alive, because it's what goes back to the reality of our border. If we keep the essence of our culture, then our border towns will gain so much more from us continuing these conversations. In a perfect world, borders wouldn't exist. We would build a bridge and talk about unity and welcome everyone. But I think talking about all these kind of makes it feel like we're united and we're educating each other on my home, on many people's home, on so many people's experiences. So I challenge you to go out there and tell someone your lived experience, whether it's similar to mine or completely different to mine. Share it because it's important, whether you live at the border or not, whether you're Mexican American or not. Share your stories because they matter. Your home matters. Where you come from matters. And I hope you got to see the real life stories of people who are from the border, who experience the barrio and, being a part of this community. Thank you. Muchas gracias.